Breaking news tonight. Something truly extraordinary has just erupted in the heart of Washington, D.C., and it is threatening to crack the foundations of American governance. In the last few hours, a shockwave of high-level resignations has ripped through the White House, with top officials abandoning their posts in a blunt, coordinated act of defiance against President Donald J. Trump. Sources say Trump is refusing flatly and publicly to step aside, even as legal and political pressure tightens. This is not just another turbulent chapter in the chaos of a second term. This is a live, cascading breakdown, an institutional collapse unfolding in real time, with the country staring at the edge of something bordering on anarchy. At the center of it, a cluster of senior White House officials, cabinet-level figures and key advisors submitting resignations en masse. And the target is unmistakable: Trump himself. The trigger, according to multiple accounts, is his outright refusal to comply with a Supreme Court ruling issued this morning. An order demanding he surrender specific executive privileges tied to ongoing investigations involving election interference and the mishandling of classified documents connected to earlier campaigns. What is raising the alarm is how fast this moved. Sources close to the administration say the decision to walk was finalized behind closed doors during an emergency late-night meeting in the Situation Room held just minutes ago. These are not low-level staffers drifting away quietly. These are heavy hitters: the Chief of Staff, the National Security Advisor, and multiple deputy secretaries from critical departments, Defense, Homeland Security, and more. Their resignation letters leaked almost immediately to major outlets, and the language is unmistakably severe. Irreconcilable differences, with the president's refusal to uphold the rule of law and explicit fears that remaining in their roles would make them complicit in what they describe as constitutional violations. One letter in particular, reported to be from the acting Attorney General, hits like a sledgehammer. The president's defiance not only endangers national security, it erodes the very institutions we swore to protect. This is not routine friction. This is not standard political conflict. This is what it looks like when confidence in the executive branch collapses completely. When disagreement transforms into institutional failure. The behavior of these officials signals something deeper than frustration. It looks like a line has been crossed where people who once tried to navigate the storm are no longer willing to accommodate it. Inside the Beltway, whispers suggest this coordinated exit did not happen in a single night. It was reportedly mapped out over the past week after repeated attempts to persuade the president to change course ended in failure. And now the fire is spreading into the Republican Party itself, an unprecedented signal. Former allies and senior GOP insiders are no longer defending Trump with the ferocity we have seen in past crises. The silence is the headline. No meaningful statements from key figures like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell or House Speaker Mike Johnson. Just carefully empty, no-comment responses that speak louder than any press conference. Behind closed doors, the mood is described as panic. Party leaders are reportedly racing through damage control calls, trying to distance themselves from whatever comes next. Public loyalty, once the defining feature of Trump's grip on the party, has shifted into cautious hedging. Cancelled joint appearances and quiet withdrawals from endorsements. The meaning is clear. They see what is coming, a potential implosion that could devastate the GOP in the 2026 midterms and beyond. One anonymous senator speaking off the record reportedly put it bluntly: "We have hit the point where survival means cutting ties, not doubling down." For insiders who once rode Trump's populist wave, self-preservation is now outranking allegiance. As this night progresses, the legal and power cascade is already starting to move on its own, like dominoes falling once the first push lands. The mass resignations activate enforcement mechanisms embedded in federal protocols, including potential contempt proceedings if the president continues refusing court orders. And the outcomes being discussed are extraordinary. Everything from arrest warrants if defiance escalates into a barricade situation, to the possible invocation of the 25th Amendment by whatever cabinet structure remains. But with so many vacancies, even that path is riddled with complications. If investigations intensify, additional measures could follow: asset seizures, freezes on executive-linked accounts, and a constitutional showdown unlike anything modern America has witnessed. One move now compels the next. The Supreme Court's ruling, upheld after an appeal denial earlier today, demands immediate turnover of documents. Trump's refusal is now the spark that is igniting an automatic chain reaction. Congress is reconvening tomorrow in an emergency session. Democrats are already pushing impeachment articles, and what is shocking is the growing signal, even from some Republicans, that removal processes may be on the table. Behind the scenes, multiple institutions appear to be moving with unusual speed and coordination, suggesting a shared belief that the president's resistance is weakening under pressure. The apparent strategy right now is containment. Isolate the president from his usual support networks, limit collateral damage to broader government functions, and lock down positions before the crisis escalates into something uncontrollable. The objective is to seize control of the narrative, prevent desperate power grabs, and set legal and political boundaries in place while there is still time. Expect Trump to respond publicly and defiantly, possibly via a late-night post or an impromptu Rose Garden appearance, railing against deep state traitors and rigged courts. Emergency filings from his legal team are expected, seeking stays and reversals. And counter-orders directed at federal agencies could test the loyalty of civil servants in real time. International reactions are already starting to arrive. Allies like the United Kingdom and Canada are expressing concern about US stability. The struggle is shifting fast from politics to enforcement, from rhetoric to mechanism, from loyalty to survival. What began as a legal dispute is morphing into an all-consuming crisis, with Washington buzzing with rumors of heightened security preparations and contingency planning for unrest. As dawn approaches, the streets around the White House feel unnaturally still, quiet, in a way that does not calm you but warns you. Tension hangs like the air before a hurricane. Protesters are beginning to gather in small clusters, holding signs demanding accountability. Barricades multiply. The fear is that if this standoff drags on, the country could slide into widespread instability. Inside the executive mansion, sources claim Trump is hunkered down with a skeleton crew of hardline loyalists plotting next steps. Amid emptied offices, unanswered phones, and a government machine suddenly missing its top gears. And as more details emerge, the depth of the GOP's internal fracture becomes clearer. Senate. Republicans, once an unbreakable shield, now appear visibly split. Explosive reporting from Capitol Hill suggests a group of Republican insiders, including several connected to the Judiciary Committee, held a clandestine meeting last night to discuss contingency plans for a post-Trump era. This is not being framed as betrayal for sport. It is being framed as triage, saving the party from total destruction. One participant reportedly leaked the existence of the meeting to a major network. The absence of familiar defenders is striking. Figures like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, historically loud, aggressive allies, have gone quiet. Their social feeds, usually blazing during moments like this, remain dormant. And journalists claim private emails and texts show frantic conversations about distance strategies. "We cannot go down with the ship," reads one message, attributed to a senior aide. And when public statements do appear, they are padded with phrases like "respect the process" and "let the institutions work," rather than full-throated endorsements. The political implications are enormous. With the 2026 midterms looming, many insiders are treating this as a potential death knell for Trump's influence, forcing the party to pivot or risk electoral wipeout. And this turning point supercharges the legal cascade. Each resignation strips away another layer of insulation around the president. The Supreme Court ruling, reported to have followed a marathon session ending in a 6-3 decision against Trump, now triggers a series of automatic enforcement steps under federal law. Contempt proceedings appear inevitable, with the Justice Department now operating under interim leadership aligned with institutional norms, preparing to move. Potential outcomes being discussed range from asset seizures tied to Trump's business empire, to freezes on campaign funds, to even an arrest warrant if subpoenas are ignored and defiance hardens. Removal processes are accelerating. House Democrats are drafting impeachment articles for 26 obstruction, and behind closed doors, whispers of the 25th Amendment are circling among remaining cabinet members. One constitutional expert summarized the danger like this: "This is the collision point, executive defiance slamming into judicial authority, where the only way forward may involve law enforcement or even military-adjacent continuity protocols." The mechanisms feed themselves. Trump's refusal forces agencies to act, creating a domino effect that could culminate in a forcible removal from office. Behind the scenes, leaks describe calculated coordination. The FBI and Secret Service are reportedly on heightened alert, sharing intelligence with congressional security to prevent rogue actions. The speed and the silence suggest a collective belief inside the system. Trump's resistance is cracking, weakened by isolation from his inner circle. The strategy now looks multi-layered. Containment to prevent chaos from spreading. Isolation to cut off communication channels, and damage limitation to safeguard core government operations. Budget negotiations, foreign aid, defense posture. And there is a messaging component too. Selective leaks aimed at framing resignations as patriotic duty, not betrayal. There is also a tactical objective. Prevent any physical or legal escape route by monitoring movements and securing affidavits from resignees, documents that could later become evidence in trials. One insider described it as a surgical strike, remove the problem without collapsing the system. And with each passing hour, the escalation tightens. Trump's public response is expected at any moment. Aides claim he is preparing a national address, possibly bypassing traditional media to stream directly on Truth Social, where he will frame this as a witch hunt led by radical leftists and rhinos. Emergency motions are already hitting the courts, executive privilege claims, procedural challenges. But analysts expect swift denials, given the Supreme Court's stance. Counter-orders could follow, with Trump attempting to instruct federal employees to disregard resignations or ignore mandates testing the bureaucracy's resolve. Overseas reactions are intensifying. NATO-aligned leaders are issuing careful statements, urging calm, while quietly repositioning diplomatic posture. Asian markets open jittery, with US futures dipping on fears of instability. The struggle is evolving fast, from political maneuvering to raw enforcement. Words give way to actions, and loyalty yields to survival. The question now is whether remaining officials hold the line or join the exodus, potentially tipping the balance toward a full-scale governance crisis. On Capitol Hill, the sun is barely up over the National Mall, but the Capitol already feels like a fortified zone. Barricades along Pennsylvania Avenue, Capitol Police in riot gear, shoulder to shoulder at entrances. Helicopters circling in low, heavy sweeps. And inside the marble corridors, what began as quiet defections has metastasized into a Senate shockwave. Republican senators turning openly against President Trump in scenes veteran staffers describe as the most chaotic since Watergate. The rupture reportedly crystallized during an unscheduled closed-door caucus meeting in the old Senate chamber. Multiple attendees, speaking anonymously, claim more than a dozen GOP senators, many of whom stood beside Trump only months ago, delivered blistering rebukes of his refusal to comply with the Supreme Court or step down. Senator Susan Collins of Maine reportedly spoke first. The president's actions have crossed into dangerous territory that threatens the republic itself. Mitt Romney followed, reading portions of a resignation letter from an earlier advisory role, calling the standoff a deliberate assault on constitutional order. The sharpest signal may have been silence from a former ally. Senator Josh Hawley, long linked to Trump's most devoted wing, reportedly said little in the room, then later released a single sentence. The rule of law must prevail, even when politically inconvenient. Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham, once a vocal defender, reportedly left early and has not returned calls from White House staff. Behind the scenes, party whips are scrambling to prevent a public rupture, but leaks suggest it may already be too late. Audio snippets reportedly capture heated exchanges. Senators accusing Trump of gambling with the country's future to protect himself. Public loyalty has evaporated almost overnight. Republican timelines are suddenly filled with cautious phrases. Respect judicial authority. Follow the process. Instead of the familiar witch hunt defences, joint appearances are being cancelled. Fundraising blasts that once featured Trump's name now omit it entirely. The quiet exit is accelerating. 3 House Republicans have reportedly announced they will not seek re-election, citing the toxic environment and the ongoing crisis. The message is unmistakable. They see the writing on the wall and are positioning themselves for a post-Trump GOP. In the run-up to the midterms, this internal fracture intensifies the legal and power cascade. With cabinet resignations leaving critical agencies leaderless, acting officials are forced into an immediate choice: loyalty to the president or fidelity to the Constitution. The Justice Department, now run by interim leadership emerging from the career ranks, has formally notified the White House that contempt proceedings will begin within 48 hours absent compliance. A federal judge in D.C. has reportedly issued a show cause order directing Trump to appear personally or risk an arrest warrant, a move scholars describe as nearly unheard of for a sitting president. Outcomes now include not only contempt, but the potential activation of emergency removal protocols under obscure federal succession provisions tied to refusal to comply. House Speaker Mike Johnson, under pressure from both sides, has scheduled an Emergency Rules Committee meeting to consider fast-tracking impeachment articles focused on obstruction and abuse of power. Even if Senate conviction remains unlikely in the short term, the mere filing deepens Trump's institutional isolation. One action compels another. The show cause order triggers reporting pathways, which in turn pressures committees to act, creating a chain of accountability that becomes difficult to interrupt. Experts warn that if Trump attempts mass firings of acting officials, it could accelerate 25th Amendment discussions among whatever cabinet remnants remain. The arithmetic is razor thin, with so many seats vacant. But behind the curtain, maneuvering is at a fever pitch. Senior Pentagon officials have reportedly briefed congressional leaders on continuity of government protocols, stressing that chain of command integrity must hold regardless of political turmoil. The FBI is said to be increasing protective details around key defectors, anticipating threats from extremist elements still loyal to Trump. The speed across branches suggests a shared institutional conclusion. The president's position is no longer tenable, and resistance is weakening as isolation takes hold. The current phase appears to be containment fused with isolation. Keep the blast radius inside the executive branch while systematically cutting off Trump's access to levers of power. Damage limitation includes emergency briefings for foreign diplomats to reassure allies that core US functions remain intact. The objective is to prevent any dramatic escape attempt, legal, physical, or geopolitical, while locking in defections through public commitments and private assurances of protection. As this crisis enters its second full day, the world is watching with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. Markets in Europe and Asia have opened sharply lower. Dow futures are reportedly signalling a potential 800-point drop at the New York Open. Currency traders are said to be fleeing the dollar for safe havens like the Swiss franc and the Japanese yen. Bond yields spike as investors price political risk at levels not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. Global headlines echo a single question: is American democracy coming apart in real time? NATO headquarters in Brussels issues a rare public statement expressing deep concern about developments that could affect transatlantic security coordination. Behind closed doors, European leaders are reportedly accelerating contingency planning for a scenario in which US executive authority remains contested for weeks or months. The UK Foreign Office quietly advises British nationals in Washington to avoid protest zones. Canada's Prime Minister convenes an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss border security implications if unrest escalates. The credibility damage is immediate. America's legal system, often held up as a global model, is suddenly being scrutinized by authoritarian regimes eager to claim hypocrisy. Chinese state media reportedly publishes gleeful editorials declaring the beacon of democracy has dimmed. Russia's foreign ministry issues a statement offering sympathy to Americans amid internal strife. Even allies reposition. France and Germany reportedly delay joint military exercises, citing uncertainty over US command reliability. Latin American governments postpone high-level visits. Middle Eastern partners shift negotiations away from political appointees and toward career diplomats. Diplomatic insulation erodes by the hour. Markets face another looming risk if the standoff drags on. Analysts warn a credit rating downgrade of US sovereign debt could return to the table, something last seriously weighed during the 2011 debt ceiling crisis. Inside the country, the conflict has decisively shifted from politics to enforcement, from speeches to mechanisms, from loyalty to sheer survival. Trump's inner circle reportedly contracts to family members and a handful of ultra-loyalists barricaded inside the residence. Defiance continues, an afternoon Truth Social barrage accusing traitorous rhinos and corrupt judges of staging a coup. But the posts gain fewer reposts than usual, fueling speculation that even his base may be fracturing under the weight of events. Emergency filings flood the courts, stay requests, injunctions, recusal motions. Lower courts reject them at breakneck speed, citing the urgency of the Supreme Court mandate. Counter-orders begin to surface. Trump directs acting department heads to ignore subpoenas. But career civil servants reportedly refuse, citing personal liability and legal constraints. Global institutions recalibrate. The IMF places US economic forecasts under special review. The UN protesters now number in the thousands, split between those demanding immediate removal and a smaller, angrier contingent waving MAGA flags and chanting against deep state traitors. Clashes remain limited so far, but police lines thicken with each hour. And at this point, it is no longer a story about one man. It is a stress test of the system itself. Whether centuries-old checks and balances can hold when a president acts as if he is exempt from their authority. The resignations, the Senate fracture, the legal cascade, the global alarm, all of it funnels into one central question. Can American democracy function when its chief executive declares himself above its rules? The outcomes now compress into three stark paths. First, enforcement. US marshals or federal agents executing court orders, potentially entering White House grounds under extraordinary security conditions. Second, collapse. A breakdown so severe that acting officials invoke emergency succession, triggering chaotic transfers of power amid competing claims of legitimacy. Third, historic confrontation. A prolonged standoff ending in impeachment and conviction. 25th Amendment, removal or, in the most dangerous scenario, military involvement to restore constitutional order. After a moment like this, nothing returns to normal. The precedent would echo for generations, reshaping executive power, party loyalty, and public trust. Even if Trump ultimately relents or is removed, the damage remains. A party fractured beyond easy repair, a judiciary under siege, an electorate further polarized, and allies abroad who will never again assume automatic US stability. The crisis is now irreversible and speeding up beyond containment. Every hour without resolution tightens the noose. More defections, sharper market reactions, louder global warnings, stronger institutional resolve. The machinery is moving, and it does not stop for appeals, tweets, or defiance. History is being written tonight, not only in speeches or dramatic steps on Capitol Hill, but in quiet resignations, whispered caucus conversations, sealed orders, and the steady turning of legal gears. The test is underway. The system is bruised, strained, yet still functioning, and right now it is answering.